Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Splash Page. I'm Sean, and as always, I'm joined by Andrew, and today we're going to be talking about what we're considering the mid-season finale for Invincible Season 2. Andrew, what'd you think?
Yeah, it was a great episode. We're at the halfway point. We're coming into intermission, and I like how the season is very similar to last season, and yet completely different, like tone wise. It was really fun.
Yeah, and also, I mean, it's not typical to get a mid-season finale, so I love the way that they treated this, giving us basically a huge episode as episode 4,
Yeah,
knowing that I'm hoping in the next few months we get the remaining 4 episodes for Season 2.
yet we don't have a schedule on that yet, do we?
No,
Something locked
there's
down.
no date yet.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, we'll
which
see
is
when we'll see.
wild.
I know.
Yeah, because we know they are produced, so they
Yeah.
have them. They're just delaying putting them out, so they have some more content.
Yeah. Well, can't really argue. We can. All we could do is talk about it and wait.
Yeah, and so these first 4 episodes, and we'll probably even do a video about them in a little bit. They make up an arc which doesn't really come to a conclusion from where you think it would. We open the season with Angstrom Levy, and then we end the season with this battle on Thraxa, and
Yeah.
really seeing what the Viltrumites' powers are. So there's a lot to talk about for this arc, but right now let's concentrate on this episode because we open with seeing what happened to Nolan after episode 8 of season 1 when he leaves the planet after his fight with Mark. He kind of just wanders.
It was very. I mean, they were playing Nick Cave Avalanche, which I know came out early '80s, but it felt like a very '90s feel. This episode, just sad, emotional music while he was flying through the cosmos.
Yeah, and the artwork was beautiful here. I really, really loved it.
Gorgeous.
And as he's standing in front of a black hole, he sees this ship slowly getting sucked into it and he decides to save them rather than just letting that happen. And then they take him back to their world and in pretty short order is made their monarch.
Two quick questions. He was about to
Yep.
commit suicide in front of a black hole, correct? So is Omni Man stronger than the force of the gravitational pull of a black hole? Because
Oh,
that puts to
absolutely.
rest. Because that puts to rest any questions that he could beat up Homelander or not. I don't think Homelander could resist a black hole.
No, 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 no,
Yeah,
no.
that
Homelander
was
could barely like
impressive.
lift a plane. It's Nolan. It's a Nolan
Yeah,
by 100.
yeah,
It comes across as Nolan is like distressed and lost. In the comics, we have a much different story. Nolan leaves Earth with the intention of finding another civilization to conquer in hopes that it kind of means that he's still doing the Viltrumites' duty and that he's still respected within that group.
right.
But what we see is once he gets to Thraxa, he says like, "Oh, this is the people I could easily conquer." He's pretty much handed the mantle there in the comics because that Thraxans just don't live that long, and
Yeah,
therefore he's going to be kind of their ruler. And one interesting fact I think is that we see this longing and kind of aimless wandering out of Nolan, and at the same time we see a cut to Debbie doing a similar thing on the streets of Chicago after the SOS meeting. And I think both of these scenes are just beautifully drawn and
yeah.
put together. Andrew, did you see the
Oh,
similarities?
absolutely. And I said they were playing Avalanche by Nick Cave, and they were playing, I forget the name of the song, but the band was called Blonde Shell, and that came out in 2023, apparently. But they have that same musical, like, taste to them that felt very early to mid 90s angsty. Just walking barefoot through the streets, about to jump off a bridge. It felt like a 90s music video, and then yelling at the cemetery.
Yeah, the cemetery thing was very dark, and we've said this a number of times. Debbie goes through a lot of emotions in the comic, but she's just not a main
Yeah,
character in the extent that we get several like story arcs with her. So in the show, they've done a much better job to kind of introduce us to her and take us through her journey, and we see her struggles. She talks to Art, which is something she
yeah.
does in the comic. Art, who was Nolan's best friend, for lack of a better term, who also feels evenly betrayed, does give her a really nice compliment about the fact that her raising Mark the way she did is the reason why the Earth
Yeah,
still
and that is
exists.
a kind of a common trope. The wife or the significant other of the superhero is actually the strong one. They have the superpowers. You had to deal with all that. But in this case, it is true. She is the
Mm-hmm.
reason we're not all. Well, they aren't all slaves. Weird to put myself into that book,
Yeah,
but yeah,
and And yeah, I mean, it makes sense too because we've seen the alternate versions, alternate reality versions
Yeah,
of Mark who went with Nolan, and all those worlds were destroyed. And we didn't see what Debbie was doing there. Maybe she had passed away earlier or
yeah,
something like that, and that's what led to Mark going dark. Because we have to remember that there are alternate reality
yeah,
Marks out there. Debbie then also has a conversation with Cecil about not wanting any money from the government because she does not want to be in their back pocket. Calls out that Nolan's books, she doesn't want any money from them
yeah.
either. And so Debbie is kind of trying to cut as many ties
That
as
was a good
possible.
line too. That I really, again, the writing here is just on point. When she said, "If we take money from you, we'll feel like we owe you," and I am done feeling like that. This is what I'm saying. Everyone in this show is the healthiest version of a human you could possibly find.
Yeah, and now now we're jumped to someone that's no longer a human, Donald, who seems to be going through his own identity crisis. He knocks on Debbie's door. Debbie's not home, and then he realizes that across the street there's that blown up house. Does some digging, ends up finding the video of him blowing up and fighting Nolan, and then kind of does like a little Terminator style blood test. Am I a
Yeah,
human or what am I? And he's bleeding, but then he realizes that in trying to cut himself, he bent the top of the
yeah,
knife.
and I didn't think it in the moment, but I could see how it could be another parallel to Nolan standing in front of a black hole and Debbie almost jumping off of a bridge, and then Donald in the bathroom with a knife to his wrist. But it was for the exact opposite reason. It's because he really wanted to be alive.
And then we're just moving quickly through a lot of these storylines. We have the Mauler twins, which now, since one of them is, very disfigured, when he creates his clone, they are not complete copies of each other. It's very obvious to tell which clone is the older clone. And he kind of puts the new
Yeah,
one to
I
work.
loved that interaction as well. And I loved it when it came up in the books because there's a scene last season where Rudy Robot says, "I never understand why you guys do that. Like, forget which one is the original." And that piece of writing, that I love that. It really does make sense.
Yeah, it was fun, and then the obvious
Yeah.
ending happens where the clone is like,
Yeah.
I can't deal with this, I'm not your slave, and he ends up
Yeah.
killing the original so he can make another clone of himself where
Yeah.
there are no older and
Yeah.
youngers. And then finally Eve, who is another character going through more internal strife based on the fact that she made that park in the last
Yeah.
episode or two episodes ago that kind of fell in on itself. Luckily, no one was killed, but it obviously puts her in the perspective of she doesn't know exactly how to
Yeah.
use her
Yeah.
godlike powers, and she struggles with it until she finds someone to take out some anger on, who is
Yeah, she
Kilcannon.
beats the crap out of him and goes a little too far, almost or possibly killing a couple falling off a bridge. She could have ended that and kept it
Yeah,
going,
we
and
didn't.
they may or may not be alive. I don't know.
Yeah, they didn't give us an answer if they
Yeah.
survived or not. So I don't know if the show will. They probably will make a nod to it later. But it does look like Kilcannon gets away with whatever he was trying to steal
Oh, that's
from
true.
Robot. So we'll see if that comes back. Kilcannon really wasn't a big character at
No.
all in the Invincible comics. I think he played a part in some of the like Adam Eve stories in the sense that they're outside of the 144
Gotcha.
issue run. But I'd love to see Invincible. The book does such a nice job of bringing back characters and villains in really unique and like important ways. It's not just like, oh, here comes so and so again to do something stupid. Like they
Yeah.
they have a point to the overall plot, which I always love. So I hope they do bring Kilkennan back in a way that whatever he stole helps him stronger, do something crazy, because that's just the way that this
Yeah, I
comic does it.
mean, I was gonna say they
I think
don't leave like loose ends, but they really do in the book. They leave a lot of loose ends, which is why we have so many storylines this half an season because they really set up a lot of stories to tie up later.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, that's the thing. They do tie the majority of them up,
yeah,
which is awesome. And here they're just making more storylines, so it's great. Even as a comic watcher, we're excited
yeah,
to see what happens because we don't necessarily know. One other thing about Eve, when she is talking through things with William and Amber, you kind of see Amber have her hesitation about what it's like dating a superhero. I think they might be sowing some
yeah,
threads in there to let us know about, it's not necessarily going to go well for the Amber and Mark
yeah.
relationship.
Well, we'll see where that goes.
Yeah, and before we jump back to Nolan and to Mark, did you happen to catch a few of the titles of Nolan's books that Debbie was
Yeah, I
throwing
caught them.
away?
I don't have them in front of me, but do you remember what they were?
We know that Nolan wrote these books, and his inspiration is really his life. So the title Savage Planet, Savage Beasts, we will find out what that's about, and we will find out about this man with a
Yes,
gun.
they really don't leave. They don't put much in that they don't call back later. Drawing is hard. They won't do it for no reason.
Yeah.
Speaking of Nolan, yeah,
Yeah, let's go back to Thraxia, where Nolan and Mark are going through their, let's call it a tiff, because they're not fighting, but they're certainly not happy with each other. And Nolan brings Mark back to where he's living, and Mark sees that Nolan has taken a new wife and has a son.
yeah, it's very much identical to the books and even the reactions, but they get to go a little deeper. They get to really play with it here. And again, Nolan just talking about how when he gets furious over the fact that he cares for these people really hit home with me. He's like, I care for these people. Why? Why do I care?
Yeah. Even to the point of
Yeah,
strangling Mark a little bit, that happens in the book as well. He's really trying to figure out, and Mark's like, dude, this is normal.
yeah,
You should have done this on Earth.
yeah,
You know, like you can only imagine the emotions that Mark's going through. And then we find out why Nolan lied to get Mark there. It's because there's no, asteroid or meteors that are hitting the planet. It's actually the Viltrumites have found out that Mark left his post and are sending Viltrumites to
yeah.
kill Nolan.
Nolan's ready to prepare to teach Mark how to fight more like a Viltrumite, but not much time to do that in, is there?
No, he's like, yeah, we'll train. It almost felt like a Dragon Ball Z type reference. But sure enough, there's no time to train because three Viltrumites arrive, and they are Vidor, which I
Yeah,
don't really remember from the comics. I don't know if this guy ever got a name or not, but he's one of them.
yeah,
Lucan, who is just a badass in the books and a badass here in the show. And then finally, here in the show, they have Thula, who was a Viltrumite in the books, but I don't think we really meet her until significantly later. So, they just
yeah,
moved her to the front because she's kind of cool. She has a
yeah,
blade in her braid. Like that's a
yeah.
badass thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of fighting going on there.
So
We did see Nolan send Mark off with his wife Andressa and his new son to the caves of Roclane, I think it was called. I like that too. He's like, why are
mm-hmm,
they called
mm-hmm.
that? Was it after an explorer? She's like, I don't know. We live for not enough time to have any kind of knowledge of our history. Our children named themselves when they could speak.
A cool thing about that too is that we know that Viltrumites age
Yeah,
slower when their powers come into play, but the Thraxans age very quickly. So to get Mark's brother to this age, I think they say he's only a few weeks
yeah,
old, but really he looks like he's like 6 months. So he's gonna age quickly because he's a Thraxan, but the second his powers kick in, he's gonna slow down in aging. So he's still gonna have that, young look for a
right.
long time, but he's gonna grow to that faster than Mark did. So there's not gonna take 18
Yeah.
years like it did for Mark or 17 years like it did for Mark. It'll get there more quickly, but then
It
slow
actually
down from
was.
there.
I don't know if Kirkman was just looking to add in another character or a younger brother, but he's like, well, how can I get it that he has a brother that's about the same age as him? Ooh, okay.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, yeah,
really well done. It's great. And so the battle commences, and in the show we actually see Nolan shred Lucan's stomach and
yeah.
his
That
intestines
is the
falling
weakest
out, and he's
part of
kind
a
of left for
Viltrumite is their
dead.
stomach.
Yeah, really. And so then Nolan is fighting Vidor, I think
Vidor,
his
yeah.
name is, and Mark is fighting Thula. And Mark has that same "I'm not going to kill anybody" attitude, and it almost gets him
Yeah,
killed when Thula takes advantage of that kind of moment of weakness and
yeah.
stabs him.
We thought we were gonna miss out on the training montage, but we kind of got it in a quick clip of Nolan just saying to Mark, "Listen, this is how you fight like a Viltrumite. You have to try to kill her, or she will kill you. It's the only rule."
Yeah, and and yeah, I mean, what we know from their species is they look down upon weaker, even Viltrumites, never mind
Yeah,
races and species. Lucan even says to Invincible when he first appears, like, if you fight well, maybe you'll live, maybe you could become part of our empire, but, you have to
yeah,
fight well. And so I guess at the end, after Thula, you think Thule is dead, right? Like Nolan hitting her with
Yeah.
the elbow, blowing off her jaw. Like I know we have a lot of characters come back to life, and even in 30 seconds later, we see Lucan flying in,
Yeah.
holding his intestines to his
Yeah.
body. But I mean, she looks pretty dead.
Yeah, no, she definitely got curb stomped on an elbow. I did like that was the other bit of
Yeah,
training that Mark got was when you kill someone, make sure they're dead. Those are the two lessons he learned.
yeah. And so then Lucan kind of comes out of nowhere, throws the giant knee bomb into Nolan's back, and renders him pretty much
Yeah.
unconscious for the rest of the time. And we have then a Viltrumite ship come down, and we meet Craig, who is one of the more badass
Yeah.
Viltrumites, who gives a quick rundown of what's happening to Mark, saying that we're going to take your father back, we're going to execute him. You are now our ambassador to Earth, and we need you to go back and take
Right.
over. And if you don't take over, you're not going to like what happens.
Yeah. And they cart Nolan off like
Yeah.
he is a quarterback in back in the day where they were just carrying him off on a stretcher. Thumbs up. Kind of remember my good work, remember my deeds, read my books.
Yeah, read my books. And I think that's a really important piece of information that Mark has to take seriously because, like we said, they're based on Nolan's experiences. But more importantly, it looks like Debbie's trying to throw him out.
Yeah.
Debbie has those boxes out at the front of her house, hoping someone stops by and grabs those because otherwise Mark's going to have to go to Barnes & Noble and buy copies for himself, or maybe just on the Kindle,
Yeah.
no problem.
He'd show up and realize that a brick and mortar bookstore doesn't exist anymore. And then that'd be a whole
Yeah.
other storyline where he's trying to read. No, that won't. Let's hope that doesn't happen.
All right, well, I think that's it from us. We absolutely love this first half of the season. If you enjoy Invincible, please like and subscribe as we have just a ton of Invincible content already on the channel as well as coming out
Big
soon.
things.
So stick around for that. And yeah, Andrew, anything else before we
I
drop?
think we're good. We'll have a few more videos coming out shortly, hopefully. But until then,
All right, well, I'm Sean. That's Andrew. Take it
Later.
easy, YouTube.